So it seems like we are the ones keeping you away from theirs in half an hour, so we'll progress. Anyway, so I'd like to welcome the panel. I'll ask them to introduce themselves, and then I'll kind of cover off a little bit on what we're going to cover today. So maybe we'll start with Cristian, if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Cristian Lopez, Senior Manager in Glencore. 5 years in the company, mining, metallurgical, and computer science background. And I've been Director of Digital Transformation before in another mining operator as well. So I have some scars that I would like to share today. Yeah, so nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Kashi is here, and I'm Global Mining Consultant within Schneider for 2 years, working in automotive industry and mining industry, focusing on innovation, technology transformation, and energy. So, yeah, looking forward to today's discussions.
Thank you, Ella. Hi, everyone. My name is Glenn Kerkhoff. I'm the Global Industry Head at AVEVA for Mining and Metals. I'm based in the United States. Came out especially to meet with the panelists and others for IMARC, so it's great to be here and looking forward to this discussion.
And my name is Javier Orellana. I head our, what we're now terming Schneider Electric services, advisory services. So I look after our consulting engagements with our customers. And I think this is topical for what we're talking today, because I think what we've seen out there is that as we're moving through this digitization journey, one of the key challenges, or one of the key enablers for successfully fostering that culture of innovation, is that data-driven agile workforce. And I think in the mining industry is one of the challenges that we have. I guess from that perspective, the industry also has to deal with what we call relatively volatile markets, geopolitical uncertainty, and the constraints around the fact that innovation needs to deliver value, right? So that is one of the biggest challenges that I've certainly seen in the industry. How do you take innovation and make sure that you're able to fail fast, learn faster, but at the same time meet the requirements from the industry, which says, hey, you got to deliver 10 times the value of whatever you're doing, because you don't know, right? The value could be that you've learned that you're not going to do it that way. Okay, so to that context, I guess I have a number of questions that I put together to the panel, and of course it's open to the broader group as well. But I want to start with the cultural aspect of it, and I'm gonna throw this on to Chris, because I know that you've had a lot. You've been doing this for a while, and dealing with people and organisations. What practical steps can leadership actually take to overcome that risk-averse mindset and the legacy cultural norms that generally slow down innovation?
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna touch on value, because sometimes we think value as just financials, right? But value in mining can be perceived as a safety operation, a easier to use thing or process, right? It's not always about the financials, I will say. So as a leader, you need to set expectations that sometimes if this project fails and you're doing it in the right position, I will come to that later, at least you're gonna get very valuable learnings that you should be able to capitalize on, right? Later, right? So culturally, how I've driven these projects during my career is like at least giving some space, and I'm gonna run now through the methodologies, OKRs, you know. Part of my OKRs is always an innovation piece that I try to embed into the business, right? Even with my own teams, with my data scientists and my automation teams, when they go to the field, we have 5% safety OKRs there, because I don't want them to like trip or something when they're actually on the ground, right? So, you know, from an operational person, you always need to embed that innovation, and you can do it, you know, by holding people accountable of that innovation as well, right? Value, again, it's not only about financials. It's not only about that. It's important, yes. I mean, all of us, we need to run a business. We need to, feed our kids and whatever, whatnot. But value can be perceived from different ways as well. And expanding on that, I think is a right approach, and share that with the teams.
Just to follow on from that, you mentioned OKRs. That's a really interesting one, right? Because, so I spent a little bit of time at BHP as well, and we were working with OKR. Now, OKR being objective key results.
Yep.
And generally, an OKR will have a number of key performance components associated with it. But what I found a struggle, and I'm not sure if you found that within Glencore or your previous company before that, is that it was difficult to get the business to buy into the OKR. And we run them for a number of projects, but then it eventually went back to having just a straight out KPI that then related to the 10 times multiplier. How did you manage that within the organization to get that buy-in?
I think it's just simplifying the lingo. So OKR for me is just it's a goal, it's a result.
Yep.
KPI can help you to track how you are against that result, but it's not. A KPI is just a metric, right?
Yep.
It's not gonna help you to comply with a goal. So for me, it's actually explaining it and simplifying it better, right? Setting those goals correctly, it's very relevant, because at the end of the day, you set the expectations using that lingo. So we always try to simplify it. It's one of our values in Glencore. It's simplify things. I mean, we want to make things simpler, not more complicated, right? So yeah, keep it simple. Goal is different to a metric. It can tell you if the goal is going to be delivered, but it's just a metric. Yeah.
And Glenn, you have worked with a number of different companies globally. How have you seen leadership try and enable innovation within their businesses? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and you raised it, Cristian, that just looking solely at the financial aspects of like a return on investment is not the only thing. One of the things that I've continually struck is this concept of risk, right? It's like not just achieving a particular improvement in performance, but what is the reduction in risk, or is there a reduction in risk? And so when you think about technology over the decades, the introduction of technology into operations particularly has had a perceived risk associated with that. There's been a number of examples that I've worked with over the years where customers have looked at changing, say, like a fleet management system. And even though all of the actual context of why they would want to change seems positive, they've declined to do it because the risk was too high. And that is that the risk of affecting production might be an issue. And so how companies deal with that is an issue, and it's been an issue for some time. But I think in today's world, it's a different story, right? Especially with the advent of AI. AI is going to have a huge impact on the industry, still to be determined how that's all going to come out. But I think there's a need now by the industry to really move forward. And so this topic of risk is something that customers need to look at, is how can I achieve the goals that I'm trying to get to with performance increase, but at the same time managing risk. And so just looking at all of the things that could go wrong, that could be potentially negative, and making sure that they're handled in addition to the transformation that's taking place to create that value, whatever way you might measure that.
And I guess one of the elements associated with that is the agility of the business. And maybe a question for yourself, Ella. What have you seen? Because again, your global role, you've engaged with a number of different customers, you've done workshops with customers. How do you see the role of agility coming into play around the whole of that innovation piece?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I think that was the starting of the discussion, that we want to be innovative, but we are talking about mining industry, which is easily sitting on top of the three industries in terms of high risk industry. And that's why when it comes to the risk, there are lots of considerations when you are thinking about something new, even if it is not under title of innovation, but you want to do the new projects, there are lots of considerations around that. That being said, back to your point, Glenn, how we can be innovative and how we can support this culture, making sure the safety is there and there is no any risk to the production, because even we don't want 1 second stopping of the process. So now it's lots of discussions about being agile is coming through. But the question is that what exactly we mean by being agile when it comes to mining industry? Because there are lots of the projects, especially when it comes to the technology projects, the technology team sitting in the room, everyone has a label, let's do agile. But the definition of the agile, what I've seen is missing in when we're talking with the clients, with the mid-senior level of the organizations, in terms of understanding that this agile is not doing agile, is just being agile, and have the mindset that not just technology teams sitting together, making sure that there is a cross-disciplinary activity. And that's one thing, making sure the right people are involved. The second bit is have the very short planning for the steps of the projects in terms of planning, do review, planning, do review, which is back to your point, Glenn, de-risking the process as much as possible and making sure you can unlocking the value in the shorter terms, which is more not just return of ROI or MVP, making sure the time to invest is just has a measure as well.
And I guess, again, question to yourself, Chris, knowing what you've done, you've been quite successful in deploying relatively innovative approaches. I guess, looking at that, what have been the key success criteria that enable you to do that?
Yeah, so I will say probably three mainly, I will say. So the first one is around having ownership within the business, right? Co-accountability, I have done all the models, so putting the product owner accountable in the operational team, in the business team, in the technology team, in the vendor, right? I have tried all the models already, and I can tell you with a lot of data, that the best way to deploy this innovation mindset or pushes or waves is to having the accountability on the business, inside operations, inside your business unit, whether if you're working with a functional business unit or operations, that they should own the implementation, right? For two reasons, mainly because they know the site, they know the complexities and nuances of the problem, and I think it's easier to upskill the agile mindset or these frameworks to someone who's been there than trying to upskill the technology person in the 10 years of experience of the underground operation, for example, right? So for me, having that ownership in that side is critical. Second is around seeing the technology as a tool, right? Not the end. I have seen a lot of projects that get implemented, and when I rock up and I ask the guys, I was like, why are we doing this? And nobody can actually reply. Sometimes, because in mining people rotate, was someone's idea, that person left the business or went to another side or went to another company, right? And then people just continue doing what they're doing and not questioning why they're doing that. So technology is a tool, can help you. If it makes your life easier, if it creates value, do it. But otherwise, just pull the plug sometimes. So like setting that. And the third one is around understanding your maturity. I will call it digital maturity, but it relies to me on data, right? How that data is created. The sensors are calibrated. Somebody's maintaining those. Is a manual input? Is the process of the manual QA/QC input correct? Right? Maintaining that data quality and setting expectations around that quality is very important from the beginning, because many people want to do AI or whatever, or set up technology project. When you actually go to the site, we don't have data. So, okay, what we're going to do now? And that's when you need to trigger and change the mindset and then becoming a modernization strategy. What do we need to invest? What CapEx we need to bring to actually put infrastructure, put sensors, network connectivity, whatever is the flow that doesn't allow you to get better and transform that part of the business, is actually the real question now. So, and that's going to be a journey by itself. You know? So those three elements are, ownership from the inside. Second, like AI technology is a tool, and third is essentially understanding the expectations around your maturity. Yeah.
So, touching on the third one, which is around, well, partly maturity, but also identifying the value, and I guess this is to the three of yourselves. One of the challenges is, and you mentioned it, Chris, that value may not necessarily be financial gains, but what have you seen that really drive that defining what a high impact investment is? Because at the end of the day, a business will not invest in technology unless they can realize some type of uplift or value, whether that is financial and or people or whatever it is. How have you seen the different organizations deal with that in defining and prioritizing those high impact values?
I think the short answer is that whenever that comes to innovation, because there are lots of unknowns and lots of risk around that. Back to your earlier point, it should be tied when the companies, and at least based on the observations, when the companies link the innovation to the high value or big return potentials in terms of the solving the sort of problems, when they tie them with those strategic roadmaps, it always pay off. Because even, for example, just if the dam is leaking, if you have issue with ore body knowledge, if whatever that you have done in the feasibility study, that was one of the examples that all of the feasibility study that's been done to understanding what's the ore body knowledge of a mine, after just 2 years, all of the CapEx investments, they ended up to understand, no, that was the wrong assumption based on the wrong exploration. And they ended up to change all of the strategy, and they needed to change all of the, size, the teeth for the sizers, all of the processing plant, lots of the cost was involved. Those kind of the issues that people facing with was like triggering lots of innovation, because they couldn't go and buy the new set of assets. Now, what they can do to make sure they reduce the cost or CapEx, to make sure they have the sustainable business. So I think it should be like high risk, high gain. That's why I think when it comes to mining, that would be maybe the strongest business case when the innovation comes on the table.
Yeah, I think I'll probably become technical here, but I really love to do it through theory of constraint. So I always apply TOC to my value chain, whatever asset I go, and I check where is the current constraint in the entire value chain, understanding your current constraint or your bottleneck, right? And then hopefully starting a project, your more sophisticated project in that space, right? I have had wins, and I also have had failures, right, by doing this. But when we actually fail in the implementation, we get so much learnings and insights of your bottleneck that actually triggered 3 new initiatives after we implemented the project. So, and the learnings were intangible, because then the plant manager told me, wow, okay, I didn't know that we were doing this or that or right. Because at the end of the day, when you do the diagnostic and trying to put the business case together, you know if you win 1% in your bottleneck, that's going to be translated into free cash flow straight away. But if you don't do it, at least you will learn what you need to do to push that limit, you know?
Or what not to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I might just add to both Chris and Ella. I think there's a couple of things here. You know, one is the topic of a roadmap, which you mentioned, Ella. I think it's important to have a roadmap and a journey thought out. And then there's the topic, which you mentioned, Chris, about, you know, where's the bottleneck? And, you know, in some ways, you know, we think of this from the AVEVA perspective as where are the value opportunities, right? Where can I, you know, back to your point, Ella, about where are my highest value opportunities for the lowest effort, if you like. So we've done a lot of, you know, value engineering on our side to look at a whole lot of different things you could do with digitalisation, different use cases, different opportunities to improve. But you can't do them all, right? So it's like, which ones do you pick to begin with? The high value, low effort, you know? Don't go after the low value, low effort or the low value, high effort. I mean, that's just wasting time, right? And make sure that what you start with is going to have an impact and it's going to be successful. And then from that, you can get wins, sometimes called quick wins, big wins. And then from that, start your journey with a roadmap to move forward over time to continually improve and continually create value.
And add to that, we have, back to your point earlier, Glenn, regarding the technology. Now, I think that's a word of, yes, we know that AI we should be very careful about talking about AI in terms of making sure it's adding value, but we see the scenarios and we are using through the Schneider, AVEVA, ETAP, the digital twins, that there's a concept of simulate before operate, which is our sort of de-risking all of this thinking about not specifically you need to go to the field and experience something that you have no idea about that. If you have the opportunity to de-risk it by understanding how the reality would be look like. Again, when it comes to the technologies, we are sitting on the fence to make sure, but there are scenarios, and I know, for example, for dynamic simulations, you're already using this for the different industries, and you just do, before building a plant, you can do the simulations. Yeah.
Oh, that's relevant. I mean, digital twinning is essentially how you can de-risk and trial before, right? Today it exists. It's not free though, but I mean, you can do it, right? Yeah. Of course, it's cheaper to actually simulate it than exactly. You know, trial on the field first. Yeah. But yeah, I think this methodology is to the risk. Yeah.
So, in that context, let me a question for yourself, Glenn. So, if I look at the level of or the role of enabling technologies to drive innovation. How do you see that as a from a criticality perspective, the interoperability, the integration, and the enabling components? How do you see that driving successful innovation?
Yeah, this is a great topic. If you looked at the industry today, I would say that from a technology perspective, the industry is quite advanced. I mean, you look at things like, you know, process automation and autonomous equipment and other types of technology, even, you know, things like the geological modelling and estimation is all something that we're really quite advanced at. But where we're just at the beginning in terms of the maturity curve is around digitalisation. So I think the topic of digitalisation is very different to the topic of technology, and that is taking data and turning that into useful insights from which you can make data-driven decisions and get gains. And so a lot of the time when you look at all the technology that's out there, you have these different systems, different planning systems, you've got fleet management systems, you've got different types of data, you've got time series data, you've got transactional data, you've got business data like in SAP. So you've got all this data and all these systems, but none of it's talking together. And a lot of the use cases, they're really coming back to that point about, well, what can I do that's quick, that's low risk, high value, high possibility of success, is going to require a lot of data from different parts. The industry has not been great at that over the years. We've been trying for decades to integrate data together, especially on the OT side. When you look at IT, like SAP, for example, it's a big business system. It does finance, it does maintenance, it does procurement, it does HR. But all these OT systems live in silos. And so the first step to really think about, right, how do we get to the point where we can start to experiment around data, is to bring that data into a single environment, right? To be able to pull data from different sources, different legacy systems, and bringing it somewhere where you can harmonise it, contextualise it, and get it ready for different sorts of analysis to try to get those gains. I think we're starting to get a lot better at that. I mean, and especially with the advent of AI, there's a lot of emphasis on getting your data AI ready, as they say. And it's just not as simple as just putting a whole lot of data in one place. You've got to get it orchestrated and managed into a certain format. So I think this is happening, and I think it's a good start. And I think we'll see a lot of, new innovation when it comes to OT data as we go forward.
I'm going to throw a different question here, though. So we're seeing that integration piece, cybersecurity, and the role of data sovereignty, etc. And these are questions to three of you. Do you see that as a hindrance or an enabler when we come to the whole innovation piece, right? Because now we're talking about a really interesting area where you want to make and drive valuable initiatives, but you have to do it in a safe, secure manner. That's an open question to each one of you.
I'll take a stab at that to begin with. I think obviously cybersecurity is a key issue that you've got to address. Does it hinder or help? Well, of course, I think it's an extra thing you've got to do, but if you are not addressing cybersecurity, you're putting your organisation at risk. There's many examples where cybersecurity breaches have caused significant problems in oil and gas, particularly in mining as well. And so it's not something you can just ignore. And by addressing cybersecurity issues properly up front, puts you in a safe environment where you can try to innovate. Doing innovation without addressing that is an issue where you could be asking for trouble, right? And so I think it's one of those things you've just got to address.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's, as an industry, we've always been trying to address, right? I mean, starting from separating the networks, right? That's the basics, but at the end of the day, I think that's something you need to worry, especially now with IoT devices and everybody brings your cloud solution, try to pitch you the cloud solution is in their own infrastructure, is a must, right? It's a must. So I don't see it like hindering the innovation, but I think that you need to think it in the design, and now you have these new practices like DevSecOps, security by design essentially, which before were not probably that relevant, but now they're becoming more important, and software team knows that, they know that, and they actually include it into their practices, right? In mining, we will keep segmenting networks because we need to, right? And essentially that's not going to go anywhere. But I don't think it's hindering innovation. It's just part of the design. Yeah.
And maybe the last point, I think, is being captured everything. But the last point is just power is data, and looking after this power is through the secure cyber way. That's something that mining needs, because it's just like tied to their throughput, to their costs, to their benefit, to their loss. So that's, I think, it's not negotiable, definitely.
Look, I think we're coming to our time. One of the other things that I think this is just as a thought point. I guess the other element to all of this is, as we start to move, trying to drive innovation. If we look at companies that are digitally natives, such as your Googles, etc., they spend a lot of time making sure that their staff actually spends time thinking about innovation. And this is one of the challenges that I think we have in the mining industry. Most of the people that we have on the asset are generally putting out fires. And then you've got other technology teams sitting above that are trying to provide that innovation and guidance, but yet they're having to deal with trying to get access to these SMEs. So that is an area that I think as an industry we need to focus on and try and adopt that agile and innovative mindset, which I think it's a bit of a challenge at the moment. So thank you very much. This is a great session. Thank you everyone for attending and staying with us while not going to have a beer or two. So please feel free to come and visit us in our stand. And yeah, we'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you.